After all the recent controversy surrounding Kaspersky, should you use Kaspersky software? Now, before I get into this topic, here are a few disclaimers. I am not an insider. I don't know anything about Kaspersky Lab, their code, what goes on behind the scenes there. I have just as much information about that as you. Neither do I have any information about the US government, their intelligence, or their internal practices or motives. In this video, I will only be expressing what I consider to be a well-informed opinion of mine. So I'll start off by answering the question, should you use Kaspersky software? And the answer is, if you're a regular home or business user who has no ties with the US government, yes. Feel free to use Kaspersky software if you think that is the best for you, regardless of the concern about Russian ties. I don't think that should be a deal breaker. And now I'm going to talk about why. So let's get a little bit of context here. It seems the US government has certain intel suggesting that Kaspersky is using its software to allow Russian intelligence to gain access to certain data on systems. The details of this are unclear, as the US government is unwilling to share the intel that they have. They're not going to share it in great detail. And since Kaspersky is closed source and it is a proprietary software, there isn't a lot of information out there about how the software works. So just as a user, you have no concrete information to suggest that Kaspersky is spying on you or has ties with the Russian government or any of that. Not to say that that's not possible, just that there's no way for you to know. Now, here's another thing to clarify about the United States ban. It does not affect you if you're a regular business or a home user. It only affects the United States government, which basically just means that they're not going to be spending any money on buying Kaspersky software, which is perfectly fine in my opinion. I don't see why that is a major concern. Even if there was no suspicion of spying, they could just decide, hey, we're the United States, we'll only use United States software. And I don't see it as particularly an offensive move towards Kaspersky. However, Kaspersky has decided to act in a really awkward way and sue the United States government over federal software ban. So they've decided to use the US court system to try to overrule the ban, which I don't think is going to happen, but the fact that they're even trying tells me something, and you're going to see this as a recurring message. Now, recently, even the European Union has suggested that it might be banning Kaspersky software for its own uses. So it's perfectly understandable if as a user you're like, okay, so the EU and the United States have decided that Kaspersky, including the UK by the way, since UK is not in the EU anymore, or trying to get out of the EU, whatever they're doing, they've also not taken a favorable stance towards Kaspersky. So it's perfectly understandable if you as a user are thinking, hey, all of these countries have decided that Kaspersky has ties with the Kremlin, probably true, and I don't want to be a part of it. And that's a reasonable statement. But here is some information that might make you feel a little bit uncomfortable about some of the other software you use. So all major US companies like Facebook, Microsoft, all of the software you use have ties with the US government. They're actively sharing data with the NSA, including very private information that you probably don't want shared. That was what caused the whole Snowden controversy back then. So it's not particularly uncommon for software made in a certain country to have ties at some level with the country's intelligence, especially if that software has a large market share and is one of the main players in the industry, which Kaspersky is in Russia. So I'm sure that there must be some ties within Kaspersky and the Russian intelligence. How ethical those ties are, that is something that can be put to question. I also follow Mr. Eugenes Kaspersky, the guy you see in the picture here, and he's reacted very strongly against this ban, which to me suggests that this was more of a surprise to him. Because think about it, if they did have ties with Russian intelligence and then they got caught in a major intelligence operation, he would typically try to ignore the matter, not get as much public attention, so that things just go under the radar and what they're doing is not noticed or does not come to light. However, the fact that he reacts so strongly to this suggests that this is at least an exaggeration of what is actually happening. Now, keeping all of these things in mind, I don't see this as a particularly threatening issue. Read the EULA for Kaspersky and you read the EULA for another company, say Bitdefender or Symantec, you'll see they're mostly very similar. They all share a certain amount of data. In fact, Bitdefender is very aggressive with data sharing and all that. So there's no reason to single Kaspersky out here. And let's face it, you probably have no serious intel that the Russian government would be interested in any way that would compromise national security. Again, I perfectly understand why the United States government would want to outlaw Kaspersky from their own systems. I think it makes perfect sense in the 21st century, where cyber war is probably a very obvious reality. Countries that don't get along very well diplomatically, the same way they're not going to share a lot of internal ties, they're not going to share a lot of internal information, they would probably not want to share security products, especially cybersecurity products. That's perfectly understandable and has nothing to do with what users choose to protect their own systems. So the final take is that if you work for the US government, if you're in the police force, if you're in any intelligence operation, or you have any strong ties with the US government, which means you have certain classified information on your computer, then you probably shouldn't use Kaspersky software. Even if you believe that these allegations are false, it makes sense as a precautionary measure. But for all other people, I think it's perfectly fine to use Kaspersky. I know a lot of AV companies have joined into this bashing. They're trying to take advantage of the situation and try to promote their product. Bitdefender's done it, but I do not stand with them on that. I think that's just nasty marketing for you. It has nothing to do with what they actually think of Kaspersky or the news or anything. So feel free to use Kaspersky products for all intensive purposes. Don't worry about it too much. Like and share the video if you enjoyed it. This is Leo from the PC Security channel, and as always, stay informed, stay secure.